Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good evening, listeners. It's a lovely, chilled night here in suburban Illinois. The stars are out and the weather is crisp but not cold. I'm in a winter cap and some gloves. It's just a very nice evening to be walking home and talking with you. This is the second episode of Movie Week 2022, in which I do 3 episodes talking about movies and games. This one is going to be a barn burner because I have to talk about 31 movies in one go. I don't really going to talk about all of them, but I'm going to list them for you so that you can check them out later. If you want to see what I had to say about each of these movies, you can head over to letterboxd.com/wombat929 and you can look up my movie reviews there. There'll be a link to the list, to the movie review diary in my show notes. I'm not going to link to every movie because that's a lot of them, but you can go there and check out my reviews of each of these movies. So, without further ado, as a reminder, in September and October, I watched 31 horror movies over the course of, really like 6 weeks, because I started mid-September because I knew that there would be some days in October where I just would not have time to watch a horror movie. So I banked a bunch early, and then I did in fact fulfill the goal. So here's the list of movies that I watched in order. Let the Right One In, The Wolf of Snow Hollow, Crawlers, Salem's Lot, Hilarious, We're All Going to the World's Fair, 31, The Boys from County Hell, Deadly Lessons, Apt Pupil, Monstrous, Lights Out, Sinister, Sinister 2, Escape the Field, The Summer of '84, Mayhem, American Mary, Hellraiser 2022, Creepshow 2, X, Deadstream, Wolf Cop, The Munsters, Malignant, Barbarian, A Tale of Two Sisters. And then I watched 6 episodes of the Creepshow TV series and 2 episodes of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities. So those are the 31, because each 2 hours of premiere horror TV counts as one film. So those are my 31 movies. What I thought I would do now is pick out maybe, I don't know, I'm going to keep talking about them until I run out of walking space. And I'll tell you about the horror movies that I enjoyed the most. There are quite a few of them that were really good. The one I've been telling the most people about because it's the one I've not heard anyone else mention and also was definitely in my top ones, and that's The Boys from County Hell. Now, The Boys from County Hell is an Irish horror movie about vampires, and the mythology and depiction of the vampire in this film is so creepy and so different than most other vampire movies that I've encountered that it's well worth checking out. It is a male-centric film. There's very few women in the movie, but other than that, it is quite a delight. The Boys from County Hell. Now, if you're going to play a game about vampires, it seems like especially this is a game where a bunch of people are trying to fight a vampire that's in their town. I think Monstrous is the example that fits most closely to The Boys from County Hell. Now, of course, when you play Monstrous, it's a collaborative game where you're fighting 3 of the universal horror monsters all at once, so that part doesn't really fit. But in that game, the creatures are going around a contained area, the town, and murdering people and causing all kinds of mayhem, and you're trying to stop them. And that's what's happening in The Boys from County Hell. They're trying to find out what the deal is with this vampire and figure out how to stop it. Meanwhile, it's menacing the town more than other things. So, yeah, if you're looking for a pairing, I think Horrified. I said Monstrous, excuse me. Horrified is the name of the game. The Boys from County Hell is the name of the movie. All right, the next one I want to talk about is Deadstream. Deadstream, I believe it was a Shudder original, which I was able to watch because last year at Thanksgiving time, AMC Plus had a deal where you could sign up for a year of AMC Plus for $25, which was a pretty good deal to me. I don't know that I like AMC Plus enough to pay $6 a month or whatever they're going to start charging if I don't cancel it. But a year for $25 was nice, and I enjoyed watching a variety of horror movies on that service because Shudder is part of AMC Plus. Deadstream was this new horror movie that they put into play In this one, a sort of disgraced YouTuber who is known for doing like live stunts decides to go into a haunted house in order to regain his prominence in the media landscape. It's a haunted house movie, and it turns out the house is indeed haunted. Now, there are a variety of different haunted house games. The two that I would think of would be Oka Ano and Betrayal at House on the Hill. Now, I think Betrayal at House on the Hill probably fits closer to the sort of madcap nonsense that was going on in Deadstream, because it was much closer to Sam Raimi than Shirley Jackson, right? That Deadstream was very silly. I mean, it was scary, but it was silly scary. And Betrayal at House on the Hill is usually silly scary. So I would say the good pairing of Deadstream is going to be Betrayal at House on the Hill. I apologize if these aren't very creative. Most of these games have, there aren't that many horror games, and so we have limited scope of things to suggest. I did watch Sinister and Sinister 2. Sinister has been talked about in the last few years as one of the scariest horror movies to come out in the last few years. I thought it was pretty good. There were definitely some very creepy moments in the movie. The main character was infuriating because he just made all of these stupid choices. But overall, the movie was very creepy and really interesting. Ethan Hawke did a great job. There's some found footage stuff that is just terrifying. And overall, Sinister is a fantastic movie, well worth the price of admission. Sinister 2, they did their best. Sinister 1 was a nicely wrapped package, tied up, ready for us to enjoy. It's really hard to take a self-contained, well-made movie and then go like, yeah, we're gonna make another one, when they didn't really leave a lot of clues for us to go to a second one. I would say the second one does follow the outline for what's supposed to happen in a second movie, a la Scream 2, but mostly it's just not as good. They did a couple things really interestingly, but for the most part, meh, no thank you. But let's say you were gonna do a night of Sinister, what do you do with it instead? And I was thinking about the nature of found footage as the quintessential piece of what's going on in Sinister. And it seems to me what you do is you look at the current offerings of the Ravensburger's Echoes series and you pick the one that seems the scariest. Now, I have not looked at any of them except Microchip, and then there's one that's like a dancer or a ballerina or something, so that doesn't seem like it'd be that scary. But I imagine one of them is probably creepy. You pick that one and pair it with this, and you've got a nice game that's about listening to creaky old sounds. Or, now that I think about it, I'm gonna have to look in my note. You're gonna have to go in the show notes to look for this. But I played a mystery game that involved a lot of audio clips that were playing from a thing. It was a sort of escape room murder mystery thing. Oh, I can't remember what it's called. I played it within this year, so I'll be able to find it. If you look in the show notes under Sinister, I'll put a link to it. So it would either be Echoes or this other game that involved creepy recordings for you to listen to go with Sinister, a movie that has some found footage stuff in it and is pretty creepy for having done so. All right, what else are some of the top picks? You know, another horror movie that I had never heard of that I thought sounded pretty neat, was getting well reviewed or interesting commentary from a variety of people, is The Summer of '84. Now, this is a movie about a group of kids in the suburbs who start to suspect that maybe one of their neighbors is the local serial killer. And the question is he or is he not? There's all this creepy stuff happening. It's great. Rich Sommer plays the neighbor remarkably well. I've always thought Rich Sommer was a very good actor. This is no slouch. Really entertaining movie. Very creepy. It's almost not a horror movie. It's more of a thriller, but still quite a treat, if you ask me. That's Summer of '84. Now, what's a movie that would go with this? Or what's a game that would go with this? I mean, on one hand, you have various games about serial killers. You could either go with The Bloody Inn, or you could go with H.H. Holmes and the Murder House. Either one of these games are about a serial killer killing people and other people trying to catch them. You could also do I think probably the best choice would be Whitechapel Mystery, which is the newer version of Letters from Whitechapel, which is a hidden movement game about trying to catch Jack the Ripper. And I think when you're talking about a serial killer, there's no scarier version of that than Jack the Ripper. And so pairing Summer of '84 about a modern day serial killer with Whitechapel Mystery would be a nice way to enjoy a movie and a game in a scary month. Another movie that I watched, which I would say is in the bottom half of my enjoyment of the movies, but is worth talking about, is Salem's Lot. Now, Salem's Lot was a TV miniseries, and so it had a relatively low level of scariness, and it's about a guy in this town who thinks that the town is in thrall to a vampire, as evidenced by the fact that this creepy old man has bought this old house up on the hill and seems to be doing vampire stuff with it. So it's based on a Stephen King novel. It's not bad, interestingly suspenseful. It kind of goes about where you think it's going to go. There's not a whole lot of twists and turns, but the growing dread of the vampire causing trouble over the town works pretty well. Once again, Horrified could be your choice for this one, or you could go for the bit more grandiose A Fury of Dracula, which has a bit more of the chase to it, but you could imagine that being that a Salem's Lot could be the end point for a more elaborate chase across Europe as the vampire and his minions move from place to place, staying one step ahead of the vampire hunters. So I would pair Fury of Dracula with Salem's Lot for an all-day extravaganza. What a delight that would be. There are a couple other horror movies that I thought were particularly significant, and I'm afraid I did not get a chance to think of board games that go with them. So if you'll indulge me for a moment, I want to talk about a couple others. There has been a trend in the past 10 years, particularly, of really interesting horror movies in which there's something creepy in the house, and it seems like a fairly robust metaphor for mental illness or just the downtrodden nature of women in modern society. The most stellar example of this is The Babadook, but you also could put in there something like Housebound. You could put in there something like The Taking of Deborah Logan. There is the one about the grandmother with Alzheimer's, which I talked about before. It's something like The Relic or Relic, but it's not the Tom Sizemore monster movie, it's the other one. I did watch a couple movies this month that fit that question. The first one is Malignant, which was really quite a delight. Scary, had a lot of the same vibes, but the ending does not go quite where you expect it's going to. And as a result, boy howdy did I like that. And then Monstrous is the other one, which I earlier said was the name of the Horrified, but no, I was talking about the movie Monstrous. And this stars Christina Ricci as a woman who takes her son, and they're trying to get away from an abusive husband, and they end up by this lake, and in the lake is something terrifying that's coming for her son. That one is pretty good and has a nice arc to it as well. So if you are interested in that flavor of movie, there are lots of options available to you right now. I did watch a couple super cheesy horror movies over the time. I watched Deadly Lessons, which was a 1980s TV miniseries. I'm going to spoil it for you here, so if you want to skip ahead a minute. The murderer turns out to be Jessica Fletcher's son Grady. The actor who played Grady in The Murder, She Wrote ends up being a cop with a chip on his shoulder who goes around killing high school co-eds in a remarkably bloodless way, because it's a TV miniseries from the 1980s, and so not much blood there. We did watch a couple sort of ridiculous humor movies as well. Probably the worst of them is Wolf Cop. Wolf Cop is a really corny C-level indie movie in Canada about a police officer who gets bit by a werewolf and thus becomes a werewolf himself, but he's still a cop. And so he turns into a werewolf and goes copping around. And there's a whole sequence where he tricks out his police cruiser in Wolf Cop memorabilia, like he's building the Batmobile, only it's the Wolf Cop mobile. That one was quite a treat. Very weird, but quite a treat. Well, I think I've highlighted most of the movies I watched that are worth mentioning. I did certainly enjoy Mayhem, which again almost isn't a horror movie. This is an action movie starring, I can't remember his name, the guy who played Glenn in The Walking Dead, and the gal from Ready or Not, Samara Weaving, that's her name. And they are in a building where everybody has been infected with a virus that turns you crazy, makes you basically all id. Basically like the virus in the Crazies, only it wears off in 12 hours. So during the 12 hours that they're trapped in this building infected, they are not culpable legally for anything they do. And mayhem ensues. It's a pretty entertaining movie, more in the line of something like, that Clive Owen movie where he's shooting at Paul Giamatti a lot, Shoot 'Em Up, something like that. Very, very silly, but a delight nonetheless. That was mayhem, hardly a horror movie, but you know, there's still like people murdering each other, so I guess it counted. So of the other movies that I mentioned, are there any you want to hear about? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and ask there. If you watched any horror movies in October, share your list. Let's chat movies over in the guild. Well, I always like horror movie month, and this was no exception. It was a good month. A few stinkers, but mostly pretty entertaining stuff. I want to say thanks for joining me on my walk today. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.